Hi everyone, and welcome to Ruth Reacts to Books. I'm your host, Ruxie, Ruth McGouth, and you're here for Season 2, Episode 13, where I will be reviewing the book Dune by Frank Herbert. So I gave this book 3.5 stars. I liked it a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the back of the book to you, and then I'll talk about what I liked, what I didn't like, and I'll talk a little bit about movie versus book, and then I'll talk about a food that I have put a link to, a blog of a food that I associate with this book, and I'll tell you about the nails I'm wearing and how I picked them out associated with this book. So let's get into it. All right, set on the desert planet of Arrakis, Dune is the story of the boy Paul Atreides, who would become known as the Muad'Dib, and of a great family's ambition to bring to fruition humankind's most ancient and unattainable dream. A stunning blend of adventure and mysticism, environmentalism and politics, Dune won the first Nebula Award, shared the Hugo Award, and formed the basis of what is undoubtedly the grandest epic in science fiction. And that's all it says on the back of the book, which is not a whole lot. It doesn't really give you much about like this big, thick novel. It is very famous. Made into a 2-part movie recently. There's another version of the movie from back when, my understanding is Patrick Stewart did it. The book was written in 1965. So I gave the book 3.5 stars. So you're kind of wondering, why, Ruth? Why did you give this famous book such a little tiny number of stars? And especially once you hear that I liked so many things about the book, you're going to what's going on with this? But let me tell you about it. So we'll get to that. So I liked the book. I definitely, on the back of the book, it talked about, it's got all these themes, environmentalism and politics and everything. So it did have interesting ideas about, religion, the aristocracy, class warfare, the haves and the have-nots. I don't give spoilers, so I won't give anything away. But, in the book, the Arrakis planet is a planet where they don't have a lot of water, and so there's some people the rich people have access to more water, and then the poor people don't have access to the water, and so there's also this thing called the spice on the planet, and the spice is blended in with the sand, and so in the movie version you can see the spice glittering in the air when this sand is blown up into the air, and it's an addictive substance as well. It's once you start using the spice, you have to use it forever. So it's there's also this layer of control that people could potentially have. If they have access to the spice, they have access to control over everyone who needs the spice. So there's all of these themes of sort of political control and who controls the spice and who controls the planet and who has access to the water, and whether or not they're gonna ever be able to grow plants there. But then if they grow the plants, would they still have access to the spice, and all of these things. So you hear about Paul Muad'Dib, this character who's the main character of the book. It follows him and his family, the Atreides, as they go to the planet and all this stuff. And I would say the bad guys in the book, they're pretty bad. I like a bad guy. Yeah, you're able to definitely hate them and despise them and want them to be definitely demolished. There's also characters in the book who do bad things and align the plot and help the plot move along, who aren't bad guys. They're not part of the real bad guys that you hate, but they definitely do necessarily some bad things because of their own motives. So there's some of that kind of interesting stuff going on in the book, but they're not necessarily part of the bad guys, and they have their own motives for doing certain things that happen. So why did I not give this a higher score? Well, I will say, so I read this book because my husband liked it, and my mother-in-law Dorothy really liked it, and they had both told me like really good things about it. And so when I started reading it, I was like having such a hard time like getting into it. And so I asked my mom, like, had she read it? And she said she really liked it. And so I'm like, okay, my husband and my mother-in-law and my mom cannot all be crazy. If they all like this book, like, it must be good. And part of it was like the current political situation that was going on was like almost so mirroring some of the stuff. It was like almost traumatic to be reading some of this and like the current political situation that was going on. And so like for a while I did like put it down and come back to it after a little while. But like the first like quarter of the book was extremely confusing. I was like, what the heck is going on? I'm a little confused about what is going on. And I wasn't quite understanding it. And I would say about a quarter of the way in, it started being more understandable. And like the story started maybe picking up and being more linear. And like it was more, I could more clearly understand the thread of what was happening. And so it got better from there. And I was more able to like understand what was happening, which is always good in a book to be able to understand what's happening. I think like it is obviously a very long, thick book. There's a lot, they're telling a very large story here. They're weaving together a lot of they're creating a world, right? Like this massive world that's not ours, like Arrakis and the other planets. Like these are not our planets that we're used to. Like there is a planet that's similar to ours that they come from first, but this other one, like none of these people are people that we know. They've got obviously interstellar travel. And so you're trying to understand, like, there's also lots of psychic stuff going on and, like, all of this sort of magical stuff happening that we obviously don't have. And so they have to explain it to us in a way that we can understand. And one of the helpful things, like, at the beginning of each chapter, it's like there's like these little blurbs by this princess and you don't quite and then at the very end of the book you find out who the princess is. And so that was nice that you finally figure out who that princess is at the very end of the book. So yeah, it was good. I decided to add the second one. You guys know what I do. I have a list of 25 books, and like as I finish one, if I want to read the next one, it goes on my next list of 25. So like maybe 6 months from now, I'll read the second Dune book and I'll come back with another review for that. But as you know, this has a movie. So let's talk kind of movie versus book. I won't give anything away about the story. But the biggest difference that I saw, like I definitely think if you've seen the movie, it's worth reading the book. And if you've seen the movie, you'll understand the book a lot more, right? But there is so much more, obviously, in this book than you're going to get from the movie. There's just so much more detail. And like one of the biggest things that was really different about the movie is there's a big timeline difference that's happening. They cut a lot of timeline out of the movie. There's, I would say, by a good like maybe 10 years that they cut out, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens in the book that they just didn't have happen in the movie because they cut a whole bunch of stuff out of the movie in order to kind of quickly like move it along more quickly, it looks like. And so there's some stuff that just doesn't happen with Paul and the Fremen because they moved it along more quickly for the movie. So just missing some characters because of the change in the timeline. Some people aren't born yet in the movies. And so I would recommend the book. Highly recommend, of course, books over movies. So for the food, I have put a recipe for a spice cake because the spice is a big part of Dune. The spice is this thing that you eat there. It turns your eyes blue because the spice goes into your body. And in the movie, you can see it in the air. It's like glittering along in the air. And so for my nails, it might be one of my favorite nails I've ever worn. So underneath, I kind of have like it's called Warm Embrace, and it does like an ombre pattern from light to a darker, it's like starts out like a sandy light color and it goes to a darker red for like the sort of hues that you see in the desert. And then over the top, I did Rodeo Ready, which is like this glittery for the spice, the glittery spice in the air. And it looks really good. I don't know if you can, it's not looking as good in the light of the camera as it does in real life, but it looks amazing. So happy with my nails, happy with this book. I'll be reading the second one. I hope you all have a great week. Hang in there, and I'll talk to you soon. I'll see you next week. Bye.